Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into, well, a story of raw ambition, maybe shattered loyalty, and definitely the complex aftermath of a celebrity death. It fundamentally reshaped, one of the tightest inner circles in music history.
We're talking about the passing of Christopher Wallace, the Notorious B.I.G., back in March 1997. His death left this huge void, right?
Absolutely.
And our sources today, they document something pretty stunning. It's the frequency, really, with which his closest friends, his associates, pursued the women he left behind. We're talking his wife, his girlfriends.
Right. So our mission today is to kind of move beyond just the gossip, the headlines. We want to examine the verifiable facts, the timelines, the accounts we have involving three of Biggie's key confidants.
Lance and Rivera, Jay-Z, and Stevie J.
Exactly. What did the pursuit of his partners actually look like? And maybe more importantly, what does it tell us about the ethical limits, maybe? Loyalty in the late 90s hip-hop scene.
Well, it forces us to ask a pretty difficult question, doesn't it? When a titan like Biggie falls, does that professional grief, that respect, does it stop at the business dealings? Or should it extend to the personal life, the relationships?
That's the core of it.
Yeah. And the material we're looking at, it strongly suggests that for some people, maybe even subconsciously, that period right after his death was seen less as just a tragedy and more as, well, a moment of massive romantic and maybe even professional opportunity.
Okay. So to really understand the gravity of what some might call betrayal, we first have to establish just how tight these relationships were. How high was Biggie's trust with these specific people?
Precisely. Let's start with the women involved. Biggie was, look, a complicated figure, and he had complicated relationships.
That's fair to say.
You had Faith Evans. She was his wife. They married pretty quickly back in '94. But importantly, they were estranged, separated at the time he died.
Okay. Then there was Lil' Kim. She was his main girlfriend, right? On again, off again from about 93 right up until 97.
Yeah, even overlapping with his marriage to Faith. A very intense connection there.
And finally, Charli Baltimore. She was the woman he was actively dating when he was murdered in L.A. So those three women, they kind of represented Biggie's core romantic life at that point.
Mm-hmm. And now let's look at the men who later became involved with them. First up, Lance Rivera. He wasn't just some associate. Our sources consistently describe him as Biggie's best friend, plus his business partner. They co-founded Undia's Entertainment together.
Biggie was the reason Un was even in the music business, wasn't he?
That's the story, yeah.
Yeah.
A heavy shared history there. Deep ties.
Okay, next, Jay-Z. They knew each other from high school, right?
Yeah, classmates. And by '97, Jay-Z was definitely blowing up, an ascendant star.
And the sources suggest Biggie was actually considering leaving Bad Boy.
Allegedly, yes.
No.
There was talk he might sign a partnership deal with Jay-Z over at Rockefeller. Imagine that. The professional trust Biggie placed in him potentially was huge, monumental.
Well, okay. And the third man?
Stevie J. He was the main producer, the sound architect, really, behind the Life After Death album.
Huge tracks. Money, mo problems, obviously.
It's Notorious Thugs, yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't just like a hired hand. He was a constant collaborator, trusted, spending endless hours in the studio.
Right there with Biggie.
Intimately observing Biggie's professional life, yes, but also his personal dynamic, especially with Faith Evans, during the making of that record.
So the common thread connecting all three of these men, they had front row seats. They were right there, deep inside Biggie's private life and business.
Exactly. That proximity, both professional and personal, it really set the stage for everything that unfolded afterward.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the first instance of this pattern, this pursuit, it seems like it was almost immediate and aggressive. And it focused on Charli Baltimore.
Right, the woman Biggie was dating right before he died.
And the professional link was instant, wasn't it?
It was. Charli Baltimore got signed to Rivera's label, Entertainment Records, in 1997, the same year Biggie was killed. So right away, she's professionally tied to the man Biggie called his best friend.
Okay, what happens next is, well, it's one of the biggest bombshells, really, to drop in recent hip-hop history. It's about that infamous incident, December 1st, 1999, the knife fight at the Kit Kat Club in New York.
Involving Jay-Z and Rivera.
Exactly. And at the time, you remember the story everyone heard, the public narrative, it was purely business.
Right, the bootlegging story. Jay-Z supposedly stabbed over illegal copies of his album Volume 3.
That's the version that landed Jay-Z in serious legal trouble for years. That's what we all thought.
But then, fast forward to 2024, Dame Dash does these interviews, and he reveals what he says is the alleged real cause.
A massive piece of context. Right. Game-changing.
He claims the fight wasn't about bootlegging at all. It wasn't business. It was about intense, fierce, romantic competition between Jay-Z and Rivera, two of Biggie's closest allies.
Over Charlie Baltimore.
Over Charlie Baltimore, nearly 3 years after Biggie's death.
Just think about the magnitude of that shift for a second. You listening. It changes everything.
It really does. 3 years gone, and the two men Biggie trusted most, his best friend and business partner, and his potential future label partner, are locked in this violent criminal confrontation.
Over the woman Biggie had been dating when he died.
Yeah, it's staggering.
That revelation, if true, it doesn't just change the story of a fight. It completely reframes the ethical standards, or maybe the lack thereof, in the industry back then.
It elevates what was always presented as a kind of gritty business dispute into something much deeper, a profound ethical lapse, some would argue.
And what's particularly striking is the maybe hypocrisy, especially on Rivera's part.
Well, our sources show he publicly stated his mission, his professional goal after Biggie died was, and I quote, letting the world know that Biggie still exists, through his label, his ventures.
Honoring his friend's legacy.
That was the claim. Yet, his alleged personal pursuit of Biggie's partner escalated to the point of violence, a confrontation that totally overshadowed any claim of loyalty.
And damaged major business relationships in the process.
Absolutely. It suggests the romantic opportunity perhaps took precedence over that stated mission of honoring his friend.
Okay, so the Charlie Baltimore case shows this immediate, aggressive conflict erupting. But let's shift gears now and look at the Faith Evans situation. That was much more of a slow burn, right? A long game involving Stevie J.
Yeah, a very different timeline. But the professional foundation is just as crucial here, maybe even more intimate in some ways.
How so?
Well, Stevie J was literally locked in the studio with both Biggie and Faith Evans while they were making Life After Death. That's late 96, early 97.
So he saw it all firsthand.
He saw their marriage struggling, possibly unraveling, right there in the creative pressure cooker. While he's helping Biggie craft this masterpiece album about, ironically, life after death.
Okay, so Biggie dies estranged from Faith in March 97. The timeline for Stevie J and Faith getting together romantically is drastically different from and Jay-Z fighting over Charlie Baltimore just a couple of years later.
Massively different. They eventually got married, but it was 21 years later, July 17, 2018.
21 years. That's a huge gap. On the surface, that seems like it completely changes the narrative, doesn't it? It sort of mitigates the betrayal angle, you might think. They waited 2 decades.
It definitely makes it less immediate, less raw than the Charlie situation.
Yeah.
But it's still a complex ethical gray area, isn't it?
Faith actually gave us some context herself. In a 2022 interview, she mentioned she never really dated until the last 4 years.
Okay, so that would put the start of her relationship with Stevie J around 2014.
Roughly, yeah.
Right.
Which is still 17 years after Biggie's death. A long time. But the crucial point remains. The person she ended up with wasn't just anyone.
It was the guy who was maybe the most constant, trusted third party during those final, intense months of Biggie's life and marriage. Exactly. It wasn't some random person from outside that inner circle. It was Biggie's producer, his collaborator, his confidant in the studio.
Yeah.
And, both Stevie J and Faith have publicly defended their marriage. They've said B.I.G. wouldn't care about their marriage.
Which might be true, who knows. But does that change the dynamic?
Well, whether B.I.G. would have cared is kind of irrelevant to the central fact, isn't it? Biggie placed immense professional trust, and likely personal trust too, given the hours spent together, in Stevie J.
And Stevie J then went on to marry his widow.
Yes. The pursuit might have been long delayed by decades, but the ultimate connection, the relationship itself, stemmed directly from that initial intense proximity created by Biggie.
Okay, so this pattern, it seemed to extend even further, suggesting it wasn't just a coincidence involving these 3 specific men. It might point to a wider cultural thing, maybe? A permissiveness within that circle.
It seems that way when you look at Lil' Kim.
Biggie's most famous girlfriend, arguably.
Absolutely. And she was also pursued by numerous industry figures after his death. It wasn't just the top guys.
And this is where it gets even more insular.
Yeah. This is where we see the pattern drilling right down into Biggie's own protege structure. A really crucial detail involves a guy named Mr. Papers.
Who was he connected to?
He was an associate from Junior MAFIA Biggie's own crew, the group he put together and mentored.
And Mr. Papers pursued Lil' Kim.
He did. And eventually, he became the father of her daughter.
So it wasn't just the CEOs like Un or the superstars like Jay-Z or the super producers like Stevie J. It was people within Biggie's immediate circle, his own, like, students and friends, who seemingly saw his death as a kind of green light to pursue his former partners. It implies this really widespread sense of opportunism almost.
It really does confirm that the lines, between professional hierarchy, loyalty, friendship, personal boundaries, they were completely blurred, maybe non-existent in some cases.
Biggie's romantic partners became, in a weird way, almost like part of the spoils left behind, open for claim by those who had been closest to him.
That's a harsh way to put it, but the pattern suggests something like that was at play.
And the interconnected nature of 90s hip-hop, this small world, it just keeps revealing itself, doesn't it? Even years later, like that Wendy Williams thing.
Ah, right. That came out in 2013. Lil' Kim dropped that detail, claiming that Wendy Williams, the media personality, had actually had a brief fling with Biggie way back in the 90s. Kim claimed he dumped her pretty quickly.
Now, why is that relevant here?
Well, on one level, it perhaps helps explain some of the, let's say, antagonistic coverage Wendy Williams sometimes gave to Biggie-related stories later in her career.
Ah, okay. A personal history angle.
Potentially. But more broadly, it just highlights again how incredibly small and interconnected that whole 1990s hip-hop romantic scene really was. These connections, these entanglements, they were far more extensive and often hidden than the public ever realized at the time. It adds another layer of complexity to this whole web of loyalty, betrayal, and relationships.
Okay, so let's try and connect the dots now across all these women. Charlie Baltimore, Faith Evans, Lil' Kim, and the men we focused on, Un, Jay-Z, Stevie J, even Mr. Papers.
Yeah.
We're seeing a clear framework emerge, aren't we, about this loyalty gap?
I think so. We can distill this down to maybe 3 common elements that run through these situations. Number 1 is professional proximity.
Right. They all work together.
Yeah. All 3 primary men, Un, Jay-Z, Stevie J, they had direct professional access to Biggie's women through their work, whether it was signing them to a label, producing their records, or just intense collaboration sessions. They knew them. They knew the dynamics. They were there.
Okay, element number 2.
Timing. The pursuit, or at least the situation enabling it, began relatively soon after Biggie's death.
Even with the Stevie J delay.
Well, yes, the marriage was delayed, but the intense competition over Charlie Baltimore, that exploded into violence between Un and Jay-Z by late 1999. That's just over 2.5 years after Biggie died.
So the opportunity was seized pretty rapidly in that key instance, at least.
It certainly appears that way, and the groundwork for the Stevie J situation was laid during Biggie's lifetime, even if the relationship took years to form.
Okay, and the third element.
Business complications. This wasn't just personal drama playing out in isolation. It directly impacted the industry structure.
How so?
Well, the pursuit of Charlie Baltimore, as Dame Dash alleges, led directly to that stabbing incident. That seriously damaged Jay-Z's public image, caused major legal problems for him, and likely torpedoed Un Rivera's professional standing and relationships, too.
So these romantic entanglements, they directly undermine the professional relationships that had been built, often under Biggie's own influence or umbrella.
Precisely. It created chaos and broke bonds that maybe should have held strong in his memory.
So if we connect all this to the bigger picture, the documented evidence, the timelines, the corroborated accounts, it's pretty undeniable, isn't it?
The core fact pattern is clear. 3 of Biggie's most trusted associates became romantically involved at different times and under different circumstances with his former partners.
And the source material really does suggest this pattern of behavior, where Biggie's death wasn't just seen as this immense tragedy that required, respectful distance.
Right.
But perhaps, for some, as an opening, an opportunity.
The loyalty, it seems, didn't necessarily survive the man himself, at least when it came to personal boundaries. His professional relationships were clearly built on shared ambition, yes, but maybe when the centerpiece of that ambition, Biggie himself, was suddenly removed.
The personal boundaries just collapsed.
Almost immediately in some cases. It really does prove how deeply blurred those personal and professional lines were back in 90s hip-hop.
So summing up, we've charted this timeline. From the immediate violent conflict over Charlie Baltimore, pulling in 2 industry giants, Un Rivera and Jay-Z, all the way to the much longer game the 21-year timeline leading up to the Faith Evans and Stevie J marriage.
Yeah.
And the consistent thread seems to be that Biggie's death, tragically, opened a door for those who had previously been positioned as trusted professional allies, his inner circle, to potentially move into these much more intimate roles.
The key takeaway really has to be that conflict, doesn't it, between genuine loyalty and, well, immediate opportunity in the wake of a legend's sudden death. This wasn't just some abstract cultural scene. It was a small, tightly interconnected web of very real human relationships.
And that web seemed to shatter upon impact,
revealing the raw ambition, maybe the opportunism that lay just beneath the surface.
Okay, so let's leave you with this final thought to mull over. Considering that some really critical details, like the alleged real reason behind the Jay-Z and Rivera stabbing, the non-business reason, or that Wendy Williams' fling only really came to light more than 25 years after Biggie's death.
Yeah, decades later.
What other layers of relationship dynamics, of professional maneuvering, maybe even betrayal from that incredibly influential era? What else remains hidden, still waiting to surface? Something for you to think about the next time you listen to Life After Death.